Welcome to Feminine Roadmap Podcast. I'm your host, Gina-r-Farrar. Each week, I bring you an inspiring conversation to help you navigate the challenges and changes of midlife so that you can not only survive, but thrive in your second half. Hello, Feminine Roadmappers. It is Gina here, and today we are going to be talking about gratitude, finding the silver lining even in uncertain and dark times, and how to practice that so we can understand and take responsibility for our own happiness. And to have this conversation with me, my guest today is Karena Kilcoyne. She's an author and a self-help coach. She's in the process of getting her new book out there called Chasing Birds, A Journey of Resilience, Grace, and Love. Karena, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Gina. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I'm really looking forward to this timely conversation about gratitude and uncertain times and how to deal with it. So why don't you share a little bit with my tribe what brought you to this specific mission and message?
Overall, Gina, it brought me, this whole mission of mine came about over the past few years of my own personal healing. And having lived through some dark times and some traumatic times and an unsettled childhood, I found that even into my 30s and my early 40s, I was still struggling. Even though I was professionally successful, I was still struggling with a lot of repressed emotion and a lot of things that I hadn't dealt with, a lot of grief I hadn't felt, a lot of shame I hadn't processed. And it was affecting my personal life and my professional life. So I really had to do a lot of healing and learning and teaching myself and reading and finding ways to get through that. And I came out the other side and I wrote a memoir, which was a cathartic experience in and of itself. Got me, I really truly believe, got me to a whole different level of healing. But in that whole process, I really came out with some techniques and some practices that I use on a daily basis that are all about happiness and practicing and finding that happiness in the darkest and most uncertain times. And that is just an overall view of my journey. But I also, to your point of this being such a timely subject, with all of this going on right now with this pandemic, and every day you hear the news and what's happening, and I just feel like it's even an even more powerful message to put out there, because I think so many people could be suffering in some silence, not really grieving because the times are so different, not really knowing how to express their feelings because the times are unprecedented. Many of us have not lived through something like this. So I just thought it was an important message to bring out there, and I'm thrilled to just be able to talk to you about it.
Let's talk about that, that idea of the feelings that we have and holding a space for them. Because when we go through something that's never been experienced, like this pandemic, the quarantine, as we're recording, some states are lifting the bans a little bit. We're getting a little bit more freedom, but even that itself is causing some feelings for some people. So let's talk about not the quarantine itself, but when we have feelings that maybe are new, different, uncomfortable, how do we hold a space for that? How do we allow our feelings to be what they are and process them in a healthy way?
So I'd like to share a little story with you about a young lady that I know, and she's in her mid to late 20s. And during this whole difficult time, she had lost her job and she was going to have to move out of her apartment. And she was expressing this to me and how upset she was. And she said, I'm so upset about it, but I feel like I'm not allowed to feel these feelings because there's so many people out there who have it worse than me. And she said, is it okay if I just take 15 minutes and feel bad and like grieve myself? And I said, of course you can. Of course you can. And that is huge, to give yourself that permission and the space to do that. Because it's been my experience that when you do not, you subconsciously end up devaluing yourself and how you feel. And you may not realize that you're doing it, but that you do it enough. And then you start to realize, or you start to incorrectly assume that your feelings don't matter, that they're not important, which is the farthest thing from the truth. Another problem with it is that you don't hold the space or give yourself permission to feel it, is, emotions are energy. And when you don't process them, they can cause a lot of dis-ease in your body, which can ultimately cause disease. It's just pent up emotion that doesn't come out. And so I think what's really important about it, Gina, is that, and what I've done with myself is, sometimes it means you have to go in the closet, put yourself in the bathroom. I don't care where you have to go to be alone. And especially in these times, if all the family's home, and is finding that space, the physical space, and go there and be honest with yourself. Ask yourself, what am I really feeling? And if it's anger, what's below the anger? Normally there's something below the anger. So what is below it? Sadness, fear, grief. And so that honesty portion is very important. And then honoring that emotion, not feeling shame about it, not feeling dirty for it, not feeling bad about it. Understand that every single emotion that shows up for you has a purpose. It's reflecting something back to you, a wound, maybe something that happened to you before, and it feels like a repeated pattern. There's something, it's a gift to you. So if you can see what that is and honor it, and if it's not that apparent to you, and this happens to me sometimes, I honor it just for being there and making me feel alive. To feel that kind of angst or that anger or that fear, that's so human, and that's so beautiful that we even get to experience that. And then I think another big important part is releasing the emotion. So once you've welcomed it in, and you honor it, and you try to get to the bottom of it, sometimes you can't get to the bottom of it, but you still need to let go of it. And so sometimes I do a visualization. I might visualize it walking out of the door. I might tell it goodbye. I might thank it and wish it well. Other times, if it feels more stuck, then what I need to do is I breathe and I love to sigh, which, can get a little much when you're around people, but I don't care. If I need to release something, I sigh, a big, huge sigh. And sometimes I'll even bend over at the waist and just let the air out and envision that emotion kind of swirling and then expelling from my body. I think that's very powerful, to understand that you actually can release the emotion and you don't have to carry it around with you.
It's really powerful, isn't it, how emotions store themselves in our bodies, and how there's this real physicality to releasing emotions, I think. Like, how they say when you're frustrated, take a walk or do something active, because it does physically work it out. I think we spend a lot of time, I'll take ownership of this, thinking too hard, thinking too long, analyzing too much, when the next step is probably just to accept it and let it go.
Right. Because the overthinking of it, I do the same thing. You can get so easily caught up in churning a story over and over. And it's your perception of a story. And then that becomes the quote unquote truth that runs through your body, when it may not necessarily be the truth. So you're running and creating patterns and ruts in your emotional energetic system. So I think that that's the danger in that. And I'm sure a lot of us and a lot of listeners out there do that too, the overthinking. And so you're exactly right. Finding a way to be aware of the overthinking and the pattern that you're creating, to be aware, to stop and release that emotion and release the quote unquote story you're playing in your head.
I think a lot about those stories. I think stories are the biggest hitch that we have, the things that we have come to believe to be true. I think there's truth in them. I just don't think they're the solid 100% truth. I think they're a woven web of truths, perceptions, and our own confused emotion in the moment. Because a lot of these things start when we're children, right? These ideas or these beliefs.
Right. That, yes. So exactly. So I believe the same. It's, you may have a disagreement with your spouse, your significant other, and it's actually a trigger, a reflection to something that has happened to you, maybe even before you even realized that it had happened to you. Emotional abandonment and emotional trauma. I mean, there's so much, that gets played out even in adult life that has happened, decades ago. And I think that, whose books I always enjoy about this topic is Louise Hay. So she has this I think it's like, it reads like an encyclopedia or a dictionary. You can look up any physical ailment you're having, and it tells you what the possible negative emotional pattern you're having is. And it's fascinating to me. You mentioned that a little bit ago about that, about the physicality of emotion and where we store maybe these traumatic past childhood emotions and where we store them in our body, and then how they play out into disease. So it's fascinating to me how all those gel together, and those patterns we create and the old things that happen to us. And then when we don't process an emotion, where it gets stored in our body, and the dis-ease that leads to disease. I'm 100% sure that happens.
I've experienced that myself. It's very fascinating to, when you're triggered, when we're talking about negative emotions, let's put it in that context. You might get a headache. You might get tense shoulders. You might feel sick to your stomach, right? Mm-hmm. I have a friend, it impacted her back. She would get like a low backache. It was a really traumatic. That one was really steeped in trauma. You said awareness. And I often say you can accomplish nothing without awareness. The awareness is the very, very first step in any healing journey. Even in gratitude, you have to be aware that there's something to be grateful for to even begin to say, I am grateful for it. Right? And you were talking about gratitude as a big part of what you utilize. So let's talk about that tool of gratitude as an awareness tool, as a healthy tool, as a finding that bright spot, maybe in a dark time.
I'd love to. And I'd like to hit on just something you said in the beginning, which is that, we're in charge of our own happiness. We're responsible for it. And understanding that, then I feel logically leads you to, well, then what do I do to make sure I live up to that responsibility, to make sure that happens? And for me, a big one that's really helped me over the years, because like I mentioned earlier in our conversation before we recording, that I feel like for me, especially, and I know other people like this, that happiness didn't always come naturally to me. I feel like there are people who are born that, rainbows are coming out of every orifice of their body, but not me. Right. And I think some of that is nature and a lot of it's nurture. And so just wasn't something for me. And then, added on with, a job I wasn't so happy with and a career I wasn't so happy in. It just felt like, well, how do I make myself happy? It sounds kind of cliche, but it's so true. And a great way to do it for me that has worked wonderfully is gratitude. And it's that finding silver linings in even the darkest time, like when you feel like life punches you in the stomach. How do you find that? And gratitude is, I think, so important, not only just for happiness, but it keeps you present. To your point about awareness, it keeps you aware of your surroundings, of your moment, of your daily life. And you're not living in the future. You're living with what you're in right now. So, I know people talk a lot about gratitude, and some easy ways to do it, I feel like, are, name 3 things you're grateful for. That's such an easy place to start. And they don't have to be huge things. And what I think is fun too is every day, make them different every day. You can't use the same thing every day. And they could be the silliest thing, right? I don't care. I like that my bright big toe looks cute today. I mean, find something, because you can find gratitude in anything. Another way I like to switch it up is I like to say at the end of the day, what were 3 amazing things that happened today? And what I loved about that was it felt so intimidating when I started doing that, because my expectation of amazing was, way up here, through the roof. And I started to realize that there are so many small things, so many moments that are beautiful and amazing that you stop and notice when you become full of gratitude, truly. And I will tell you that from my own experience, finding the gratitude in the amazing moments when life punches you in the stomach is outrageously difficult. And I'll share one of my stories. So 3 years ago, my be all end all dog, Finn, got really sick. He was 7, and he got really sick with an aggressive form of cancer. And I didn't know it at the time, but he was my emotional support dog. So I had this, life and this, very traumatic childhood, an abusive childhood. And my mother died when she was 44, and I was 24. I adopted my 9-year-old brother and I raised him. I became a lawyer so that I could support us, and felt like that was the right thing to do. I hated being a lawyer. When I got Finn became my emotional support dog. When I had panic attacks, he would lay on me. I didn't even understand what's happening to me. I really didn't. He would lay on me. He would make me feel better. He would console me. He gave me a childhood I never had, just in his frolicking and playfulness. He was an amazing soul, and he was a gift to me. And when he became 7, or when he turned 7, he got really sick. And I took him to a university, vet school, and I tried everything I could to save his life. And in every day that he was sick, and he was sick for about 2 months before he died, I found this journey, this healing journey of all this repressed grief and all these emotions I had never dealt with. And I realized that he was so sick, the last part of his sickness, and when he died was 20 years to the day almost that my mom, the last few months of my mom's life and her dying. And the parallels of taking him to chemo and watching him and all of these things made me relive a lot of the stuff about my mom that I had never lived through, really emotionally processed. And so when he died, I thought the bottom of my heart dropped out. I honestly didn't know what I was going to do or how I was going to make it. And the gift, the silver lining, Gina, was that sweet soul, I'm convinced that he knew that if he left me, I would have to grieve. I wouldn't be able to hold it in. I would have to let out that grief. And I did. And I spent weeks, a month, crying, healing, waves of grief. And it wasn't all for him. It was for my mom. It was for my childhood. It was for all sorts of things. And coming out the other side of that, that's when I was so convinced that there is a silver lining in every single thing that happens. It's like things that lift you to a higher spiritual ground. And it can be absolutely beautiful if you can be aware enough to see it.
It takes practice and it takes courage to be aware. I think sometimes there's a part of us that knows, or there's an inkling of the truth or whatever it is we're trying to avoid, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's turning and facing that the freedom comes. Like, we are our own jail keeper. We are the holder of our own key, right? Even if somebody has done something to us, our healing is in our hands. It's not dependent. I use gratitude the same way, Karina. I do gratitude practice with some friends. We do Marco Polo, and we end each time with gratitude. And so it's like, no matter where the conversation has gone, no matter where the day has gone, you stop and you honor the things that brought you momentary joy. I'm with you. I'm like the color of bubbles. I love bubbles. Like the color of bubbles, that just makes me happy. Or seeing a butterfly, or the breeze on your cheek, or, the way the sun filtered through a window. I think those things, you mentioned this idea of feeling alive. I think when we disconnect from our emotions, there's a deadness that comes into our spirit, and gratitude brings the life back, I think.
Absolutely. It sure does. And I agree with you wholeheartedly about the little things. And you start to realize that that is really what it's about. It's what it all adds up for. I back to Finn, just to your example of the butterfly, is one of the things he would always do is chase birds. And now it's just, I find myself, I never so much paid attention to the bird per se. It was more watching him have fun doing it. But now it's like every time I see a bird or a bird's in front of me, I think, oh, what color is it? What could that mean? Oh, look how beautiful it is. Look at when it takes flight. Look at how it lands on a branch. And so I think there's so much beauty and grounding in that, and the appreciation of being alive to participate in a world like that. And I agree wholeheartedly that the awareness and being brave and the healing part, because I think when we feel broken, we are so unable to, or not willing, or not, we don't have our eyes open to that stuff. We almost have them turned inside to what we think is broken or what we think is beyond repair. And I think when you start to turn outward and you look outward is when you start to realize that there are so many beautiful parts of you that are worth noticing and being aware of and piecing all back together. And another thing too, I truly believe in practicing happiness is doing good things for other people, right? So also about, looking outward, to your point about bubbles and my point about birds, it's like turning that energy onto other people and complimenting them and doing nice things for other people. I have found for myself, when I was so hurt and down and confined to four corners of a mattress for a while, and didn't feel like getting out of bed, I felt like if I could find the energy to call somebody and say something nice about them, to ask them how they are, to help, to donate, to volunteer, to do something nice for the older person next door. I mean, it's hard because, believe me, you don't feel like you want to do it, but you do it. And it's amazing how that fills you up with happiness, with gratitude for what you have, that you know this person, that you help them in some way. I think that's really powerful.
I like how you talked about turning routines into rituals. That idea of that awareness, it's like being very, very present in the things that you do and finding the comfort or the joy, or maybe when things are uncertain. We're recording this as the quarantine is we still are on quarantine, but it's lifting in different places. And we've all had to find a new normal, right? In our routines, going to a coffee shop, or there's certain things that we do that make us feel, right? It's all about how I feel like life is right, everything's going well. And I think people have been very anxious to get back to that place of normalcy, what feels like everything's going to be okay. It's been a very interesting experiment in, can I be at peace, at ease? when we really recognize that we can't control something. Like, we're never totally in control, but sometimes we feel more in control than others, right? So let's talk a little bit about that, when things are out of our control and we really feel the lack of that control. What are some of those practices or those rituals besides gratitude that can kind of anchor us and give us a little more of a stable foundation when we can't see what tomorrow holds?
I think for me, what I've done during this time is, I know in the beginning of this quarantine, or also just in times in my life when I feel like I can't control something, I would create a lot of routines because it made me feel like I was in control. And, and as you heal and as you understand things, you really know that nobody controls anything, right? There's some else going on out there that, it's not for us to say, and we're not pulling the strings. But that's hard to accept most of the time for most people, me included. And when this quarantine hit, I thought it's a good example of how to frame this topic. So I think when it first happened, I was all about routines because it made me feel like there was a normalcy, even though my family and I were locked inside our house. Well, it didn't take long before those routines started to feel monotonous and blah, and every day felt like the next day. This is Groundhog's Day. And so I started to really turn those routines into rituals that made them fun and playful. That's a big thing for me in my personal practice of happiness, is playing and feeling playful. And I think that I love that Picasso quote, it takes a very long time to become young, because I think that, we start out young and then we spend so much time trying to be this and be that and be successful, and we forget the play part. So I really try to put a lot of play in my life. So to me, creating rituals out of routines involves bringing, again, that awareness and your presence to what you're doing. Huge, right? So how many times you take some supplements and you're like, oh, wait, did I take them? Did I take them all? Did I take any? Or you drive from here to there and you're like, you don't remember how you got there. So like that awareness and that presence is so important. And I think a lot of times in routines, we just think, oh, this is a good time, I'm going to multitask, and we subconsciously start doing other things. But for me, it's powerful if I can turn, let's say, 5 rituals or 5 routines a day into rituals. Think about all the joy that can add to your day. So you can think about, when I take my supplements, think about each one you take. Okay, what is this doing for me? Do I need this? Do I feel like I need it today? I mean, there's a whole sense of like kind of holding on to something and the energy of it and kind of really being with it. I love that. I do it for myself. And then also, brushing your teeth. I mean, brushing your teeth, you could really start appreciating. I had a yoga teacher once who taught me this, and I love it. And it's, when you're brushing your teeth, thank your teeth. Wow, you're doing such a good job. I should be taking better care. Maybe I'll, use the water pick more often or something, right? So have this conversation and be thankful. And you're kind of creating this beautiful ritual out of it. A fun one that I've done and I've adopted is I make a whole ritual about feeding my dogs. So many times I'd be on a meeting or on a conference call and I'd throw some food in the bowl and put it down. Well, you know what? Now I've started to make it a ritual. I make it a time that they practice their manners. I make them do a sit down stay. I make a whole big deal about making the food, and I do a little blessing over it, which my husband thinks is so silly, but I think it's awesome because why not? You're praying over food and nourishment that you're giving your dogs or your family, people you love, dogs you love. So I love doing that. And I made it this fun ritual. So I think there's lots of ways, even folding laundry, practice put on a little thing and practice some French or Spanish or something while you're folding your laundry. Like just, I don't know, try to make everything some beautiful as much as you can. I know it's impossible, but as much as you can. Pick, 3 to 5 things a day and turn them into a ritual that make them beautiful and fun for you. It's a great way to add your own sense of joy and happiness to something that may feel mundane, and adds a little spark of something fun to your day.
What I hear you saying is that it's just a reconnecting. It's a finding your way back, right? Instead of just existing or getting up, going to work, eating, coming home, going to bed. That whole doing everything by habit. It's really getting back to who we are and why we do what we do. And I really think that life is a gift. I try to remember the gift of life, the fact that I am healthy. I may not look the way I want to look. Maybe the jeans don't fit the same anymore, but I have health and I have life. And that is the greatest gift.
I absolutely agree with that. And I like to say that your journey is sacred, your life is sacred, and we should treat it that way. Give it the respect and the honor that it deserves, that we deserve. We have been some divine energy blew life into us. And if you can really swallow that up and absorb all of that, the idea of that means that divine energy lives in every one of us. And we're all here to do something, and we're all here to contribute something. And that we're all meant to live this life that is soulfully on course. And for everybody, that's different. But I think that it just means that it's supposed to feel fresh and right and joyful and purposeful. And I think that's different for everybody. But you're so right that awareness is what brings us all back to that understanding that that the life we're given, the journey we're on, it's so sacred.
Yes, I agree. And we don't deny in this process, right? We don't deny that life is difficult. It's not a denial of the difficult pieces. Wouldn't you agree?
I absolutely agree. And I also think that it's an embracing of the dark spots. There's what's the saying, that which you resist persists. So it's almost as if I believe that is truly applicable to this, that if there's these dark spots and you don't embrace them, honor them, understand that you're in the middle of one, I think that it becomes more difficult to find the other side. It's, walking right through it and really respecting what it's bringing to you. Because I have found in my own life that those moments that you don't want to be in, that you are wishing in the moment didn't happen, more times than not bring amazing gifts in one form or another. Lessons, perspective, awareness, a deeper knowing of who you are, some higher level where you feel like you're more in tune to your own soul, to your purpose. So I wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying, that you really do need to be in them, embrace them, and honor the dark spots. It blows my mind how all of this just always goes back to some form of gratitude, right? Like even in those moments of, just, okay, if I can see this is going to turn out, or I don't know how it's going to turn out, I can't control it, but I can be grateful for what I have and grateful that I have these tools to help me get through it. I think that, seeing that is powerful.
I like when you said respecting what the darkness brings, because when we're finding the silver lining, right? There is no silver lining without the darkness. They are the opposite parts of the whole, like beauty from ashes. We know what joy is because we've experienced sorrow. We know what happiness is because we've had sadness. And there's this yin and yang to the dark and the light, or the positive and the negative, whatever word feels good to you. So I think there's even gratitude for difficulty, because as I look back over my life, Karena, and I think you are probably going to be able to do the same, you see those areas of lack, maybe the ways we didn't get what we needed, the difficulties that we went through. When we embraced them and we took the journey with that emotion, We held a space for it. We worked through it. We didn't let it consume us, but we partnered with it to find the silver lining, to find the lesson in it. That's what has made us who we are today. If we never had resistance, we would never have strength.
Right. No, that's a brilliant perspective on it. And if I can add to it, I would love to say that I think also, to your point, the perspective of when we're in a situation and we view it as lack, then I think what's important there and what I've learned in my own journey is that you think you're in the middle of the darkness because you don't have something. That's not true. The universal truth is that you're in the darkness, to your point about you're not going to know the light unless you're in the darkness. And what you learn, hopefully, from being in the darkness is that you didn't have lack, and that's not what caused the darkness. You actually had, and everyone has, the tools they need inside of them to get out of the darkness. That's a lot of healing. That's the powerful universal truth, is that none of us, not one person, lacks something emotional, spiritual. Yes, I guess there's physical lack in the world, of course, but I'm talking about the tools you have, the emotional tools you have, that, a lot of people feel like when they're in something, oh, I'm not enough. That's not the case. You have it in you. And I think part of this journey is rummaging it out, digging in there and pulling it out. Okay, I'm in here and it's pitch black. What do I have that's going to light this up? And so I think that is the beauty of this, is when you find your own bright spots in you, your own tools, your own wonder of, wow, I had that in me. Look how strong I was. Look at what I did. Right? So to me, that is something that's really important for people to accept about themselves, is that they don't come from lack. They're amazing, strong people who have wonderful tools that they don't even know they have most of the time. Right? And I think that's part of the aging and the wisdom is, wow, it's like Wizard of Oz, right? Dorothy, you had the power all along. It's exactly like that. It's so true, though.
It's like we need to become emotional MacGyvers, right?
Yep.
All the little bits and make them work together.
Right. Or that, I'll never forget, it plays in my head a lot in life, is that scene from Apollo 13 with Tom Hanks, when they had that trouble on the spaceship, and they came into NASA and they said, okay, they have a roll of duct tape, this and this and this, and now make it all fit together and get them back to Earth. And they did it. And I was like, oh my God, we're all like that. It's so cool. But we have, what if we all understood we have those emotional tools, like you say, like MacGyver? We have it all. We just have to figure out that we have them. How do we use them? What two do we have to put together? It's there.
And maybe part of the journey, Karena, is coming to me right now, is letting go of what we think it should look like, or what tools we think we need to have, and really facing the potential of the tools that we have as being just what we need at this time.
Yes, absolutely. And I think too, a lot of the experiences that we have, and you think, why did I do that? Why did I go through that? And then you realize that, 2 years later, you're in a situation, and that weird little job you had for 2 months that you're like, I don't even know, I just needed the money and I took it. Well, that actually taught you something that you're going to apply in 2 years. So it is amazing how your life journey kind of opens up a door here and a door there, and you take on something new and you learn something new and you add it to the tools you have that you're given naturally. And it's really fascinating to think about. And I think we're better at seeing it in other people. A lot of times we don't step back and observe our own life as an outsider, and look at our life like playing a movie. and give ourselves enough credit or really understand where the pivots and the shifts and the turns and the twists and the turns were. But I think if we all did that every once in a while, maybe on our birthdays, maybe that's what we should start on our birthdays, like take a look back at the year and see how it goes. But I think that's the powerful moments along your life that just all add up to make you into this person that you're here to be and lead you on the journey you're meant to be on. It's powerful to think about.
It gives a sacredness to the journey, doesn't it?
Absolutely does. Because then you realize that, sure, there's free will, but there's also a certain amount of that we're here to fulfill a purpose. And there is a certain guidance that comes to it, that it's offered up. Here's this opportunity. You can choose it or not. And so I think that, yes, there's definitely a sacred plan, and people were supposed to know, and people were meant to meet, that it's all been kind of predestined, and the world is so big, but yet it's so small. And absolutely, it becomes such a gift to even witness the relationships and how people transform and their journeys. And it's really, really interesting to see how sacred life and our journeys really are. And then I think honoring and respecting them that way. And if we did, we'd be coming from such a deep resonance of gratitude that it just shifts an entire life's perspective.
I can't help thinking that if we could learn to, and if I have been learning to, let go a little bit and allow the ebb and flow, and to lean into the process. Process has always been something I've resisted. I hate the idea that I can't just do it, get it done, be done. The process, but there's a bit of, what's the word I'm looking for? It's almost as if, we're looking for that silver lining and that gratitude and living a life where we give ourselves permission to feel our feelings. It's a lot more of a dance. It's a lot more of a journey. It's not so much a to-do list and a destination the way that I think we've been taught to live. Real life, as it's lived on an emotional and mental and physical level, is more of a dance, right? It ebbs and flows. It doesn't go in a straight line. It may go left. It may go right. It might go backwards, or it feels like it's backwards, but it's that perspective that we talked about earlier where you can kind of zoom out a little and look at your life and just really see that each one of those, if it were a symphony, each thing in our life, each person is a musical note, and how it comes together creates something. And if we are too close to it, we can't see it, right? We have to stand back and get some perspective, because I think my podcast is a microcosm of what you're talking about. I meet people every week. I may never talk to that person again, but I've spent an hour and a half with that person, and they've impacted me with their message. I've loved spending that time. Like, it's, if I could be friends with all of them, right? I'm that personality. Let's just all be friends, right? But life doesn't always allow for those relationships, not for any good or bad reason. It just is. It's that moment of connection. And that's where the silver lining is. There's something in the connection that we get to have. I think we're supposed to get something, but it doesn't have to be something deep and long lasting per se in terms of the relationship person to person. But I think anytime we come in contact with someone, we can be present and aware to what is in this moment for me. And I think that's what you're basically saying. What I hear you saying underneath all of this is, like, right now, what is this happening for? What is the lesson? What is the gift? What is the purpose? It could be a tiny purpose. It doesn't have to be big, right? Am I hearing what you're saying?
Yes, absolutely. And I feel like those connections with people, and you're right, they don't have to be long term. They don't have to be. It's just almost as if, like right now, it's like my spirit and your spirit, we're communicating together. We found each other. We resonate. Your tribe resonates. Like, this is this is our spiritual language, right? This is what we know. This is what reinforces what we know. This is what inspires us to maybe think, oh, actually, maybe that idea could be expanded a little more, and that resonates with us. And it's a blessing to find those connections, because you're right. I think that they all play a part in the symphony, or the play that is our life, that it will all, if it doesn't right there in the moment add up to something, it ends up adding up to something. And I think that letting go of the expectation of, oh, this has to be it. This has to be the one, or this has to do the thing, and this has to be this. It doesn't. It's usually not. Usually in my experience, it's the day you don't expect something to happen is when it's going to happen. It's usually the person you don't expect to be something is usually something in love and life and everything. So I just think that, to your point about going easier on yourself and your expectation and how you spin something up, I too I work on that a lot about, I know these things I'm saying right now to be true, and they've helped me, and I've healed using these techniques, and among others, but these daily practices have surely helped me. But that's not to say that I'm not a recovering perfectionist, or these other things. And so I agree with you. I am one too that always has these kind of my base level, I guess, of my being is I have these expectations, and the higher level of my being is now I have no expectation. I'm just vibing with what I can and putting out there what I love and my truth. And that's what I'm doing. And that's how I'm easier on myself. And that's also how I'm contributing, right? Because I think that we all feel, if we're contributing something to the universe, to the world, that we're playing a part and we're doing something. And so that's kind of my goal with all of this, is I feel like, being that person who's filled with gratitude makes me a value add to the world, right? Because I'm just resonating on a different vibe. Same with you. You're putting this vibe out there to all your listeners. That's beautiful. We're all like bringing up the energetic level of the universe. Wonderful.
It's so interesting that as we get older, when you think about life when you're younger, the striving and the doing and the accomplishing and the raising of children or building of a career or whatever the thing is that we spend the first 30, 40, 50 years of our life doing, we hit this point where a lot of people begin to strip away. It's like you get this realization that in some ways less is more. We don't know as much as we thought we did 10 years ago. It's just this real awareness of, gosh, I thought I had all the answers. The older I get, the less answers I have, but the more peace I have, because I don't think I need to have all the answers anymore. Like there's this shift, I feel like, in who we are as we age. We begin to really grapple with, well, does that really matter? How important is that in my life? And so I think as you were talking about practicing and understanding we're only responsible for us, how we show up in the world, that message that you're bringing, that resonating with me, the way that we're vibing right now, more of that, pursuing more of that, I think is important.
Absolutely. Because when you're doing that with people, you're offering your gift or your knowledge, and everybody has this. Everybody has a gift and everybody has knowledge. And so if you are contributing that and offering that up, then that's it. That's your gift. That's your contribution. And that's so powerful. And so to do that in a way that is your truth, back to I loved how you said that there's no light without the dark, and we all get it. And so sharing your experience of your journey through the light and the dark is a wonderful way to bring up the resonance of the world, help somebody else. And you don't have to, there are, not a lot of people can do what you do. A lot of people are not going to have podcasts, but guess what? You can give your advice and your wonderful contribution of knowledge to a younger person who needs a little advice, lift them up, help them out. I mean, people have done that for me along the way, and I'm so grateful for that. And so it's fabulous to be able to do that for people, to share your gift. And even in this, what you perceive to be, I think that's another thing that we get wrong, is we perceive that if we have this job or we only share it with this person, it's small. It's nothing small. Nothing is small. If it's your truth and it's your experience and it's something that you're going to help somebody with, that telling one person and lifting one person up is as big of a contribution as helping up 1,000, right? Because you don't know who then that person's going to go help. And then that person's going to help 5 people, and that person can help 5 people. And it's amazing what that can lead to.
And we may never know. And I think that's
right.
The journey of faith that we live, right? We put our thing out there. We find our gratitude. We find our joy. We look for that silver lining. We share that with someone. It helps them on their journey. It's like we all have one of those little headlamps on, and we're all just kind of navigating. And sometimes our paths of light cross, or our light shines on their path and gives them a little bit more direction. So I have a question for you. We've talked for almost an hour, and we've had some really great, thought-provoking, and really soul-searching conversation. Like, this is not how to bake a cake kind of conversation, right?
For sure.
A little bit more detail. So let's land this plane. And would you please share kind of 3 things that after all this time of conversation and all of the, really good stuff that you've shared, what are 3 things that people can kind of anchor in on, no matter where they're at in their journey, to help them find that silver lining, to find that presence, to find that ritual, whatever it is that's in your heart? What are those 3 things that you really want people to take home today?
The first one that I think is the most powerful for people is the practice of gratitude. So if they aren't already, if you as the listeners aren't already doing that, I really, really, really would ask that you start. It's amazing. Either start your day with it, 3 things you're grateful for, or every day make them different, make them silly, make them funny. It'll just be, they can be playful. Just make a list of 3. Another thing I love at night is 3 amazing things that happened to me today. I think that's a wonderful thing to do, because it makes you see, the appreciation. And I think you'll start to realize that amazing things happen all the time. The butterflies you mentioned, and the beautiful things. And so I think that's a great practice for happiness, even in the darkest of times. Second thing I would say is to honor your feelings. So take time. I don't care if it's 5 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour, a day, whatever it is, the feeling you're having, the time you have to make it happen, please just honor it and feel it and get to the bottom of what it is. Honesty is so important in that process. Honor, thanking that emotion for being there has been so powerful for me in my healing journey, in releasing that emotion, releasing it. So thanking it, sending it on its way, sighing it out, breathing it out. That has really, really helped me a lot. And I would love to leave that with people. And the third one I would say is that I would love the listeners to really, and it's along with the line of honoring yourself, I would really love everyone to take time every day to brag on yourself, to yourself. If it's awkward to do it to somebody else, or to do your brag to somebody else, but take some time to think about something awesome that you accomplished, that you did, that you thought about. You finished a book, you ran a mile. I mean, whatever it is for you, sit in that space and cheer yourself on. I think as women, we don't do that enough. We really don't. And I feel like if you take those moments and give yourself the accolades that you deserve, pat yourself on the back, that is going to add to your happiness. It's going to add to your self-esteem. It's going to make you feel better. Unfortunately, I feel like a lot of women are just, they accomplish wonderful things, and then they immediately have to move on to the next thing. Oh, I did that. Now I got to move on to the next thing. And they don't appreciate all the good things they do. So I would love to leave that as my third. I think that's a really important one to me that I had to learn how to do. And I think people get a lot out of that.
You know what? Today on Instagram, I posted, my daughter's got me a book by Charles Mackesy. I don't know if you've ever seen his illustrations, but he's just blowing up on the internet. And he has such he's like a philosopher artist. He just says the sweetest things. And today it said, what's your best discovery? Asked the mole. That I'm enough as I am, said the boy.
Aww.
How perfect is that?
Yes, that's perfect.
So I want to thank you so much, Karena, for taking time out of your life to spend time with me and my tribe and to connect heart to heart, spirit to spirit, and to pour out your heart in such an authentic and meaningful way. I so appreciate and honor the space that you've created and held with me today.
Oh, thank you so much. I have just enjoyed this. It went by so fast. And so it has meant the world to me too. And I enjoyed talking with you and sharing all of these ideas. So thank you very much.
It is totally my pleasure. It's the gift of what I get to do.
And you do it well.
Thank you so much. And today, friends, I've been speaking with Karena Kilcoyne. She's an author and a self-help coach. She is writing a book, Chasing Birds, A Journey of Resilience, Grace, and Love. So keep an eye out for that. You can head over to www.feminineroadmap.com/episode 167. I will have links to Karena, her blog, and her inspirational videos. That way you can stay in touch with her, what she's doing, and then when her book comes out, you could be one of the first ones to jump on board. While you're there, please leave your name and email address so you can become a part of my tribe. I send out periodic emails. And friends, please take the time to sit with this conversation. Share it with a friend. Journal about it. Think about it. Really recognize the muchness that each one of us has in our souls, in our spirits, in our lives, no matter what you find yourself going through. I hope that this conversation has come in at a time when our headlamp, our mutual headlamp, is shining light on a dark path for you, and that you can find your way again. And remember to do that for someone else. Give yourself credit for what you're doing. Honor the process. Keep digging in. Know that you're not alone. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Thank you for giving us your ear for an hour. I trust it has been a blessing to you and that you have found some silver lining in the journey that you're on today. You are enough, my friend, just the way you are. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to sharing more with you in the weeks to come. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.